Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
I was gonna say another day, another dollar, because we haven't used that in a while.
We haven't used that in a while. That is a classic gaming reference.
That is a classic gaming reference. Oh, what about was it still classy?
Always classic, sometimes classy.
Always classic, sometimes classy. Though, speaking of class, I want to thank Ian for coming on the show last episode. So thank you, Ian. And if you're interested in listening to our interview with Ian Flynn, the Bumble King, you can always go back and listen to that episode, which is the episode prior to this one.
Yeah, that's right. Give that episode a listen and throw some support toward Ian and his podcast, the Bumblecast, and make sure to check out his newly upcoming story, Drogoon, Drogune. Drogoon.
Great. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Zach, what have you recently been playing?
Seth, recently I've been playing Far Cry 5, which was released in 2018 from Ubisoft. Far Cry 5, as the name implies, is the fifth game in the Far Cry series. I will say, though, I haven't played many of the other Far Cry games. I've played a bit of the first one, and I've played a bit of the second one. But the nice thing about the Far Cry games is they're all pretty much self-contained. They will reference some of the previous games, but you don't need to play Far Cry 1 through 4 to play Far Cry 5. It's a brand new story set in a new area with new characters. In Far Cry 5, you play as a rookie officer for a county sheriff's office. This officer is nicknamed Rook, so that is the name he goes by. And you are joined by another officer, the sheriff, and a U.S. Marshal in serving an arrest warrant to Joseph Seed. Joseph Seed, along with his siblings, is the head of a mysterious cult called the Project at Eden's Gate, which has taken over Hopes County, Montana. The cult utilizes paramilitary tactics and a powerful narcotic called Bliss to put the people of Hopes County into a state of submission. After a helicopter crash, you get separated from your companions, and soon you have to team up with a resistance group trying to push back the control of the cult. As it is Far Cry, this pushing back the cult largely involves blowing things up and using guns. It's a fun game, though. It has some beautiful scenery. In fact, one thing I just like doing is just walking around. It's set in Montana, so you got some beautiful mountainsides and tons of fauna and flora to see. So you'll occasionally run across wolves and bears, but the game is just an overall enjoyable time. I definitely noticed some parallels in the character of Joseph Seed with real life cult leaders like David Koresh or Jim Jones. They're a bit on the nose. For example, Joseph wears yellow tinted aviator sunglasses, and those are famously also worn by Jim Jones. And the whole plot of a cult having guns is kind of like what was happening with the Branch Davidians and David Koresh. So the game definitely takes its cues from some real world events, but does it in a Far Cry style way where things get a little bit more over the top. I do think the game does a good job with overall world building, and I think it does a good job at kind of showing the effect of this group on the people of Hopes County, where they really are kind of in a place of fear until you start to kind of help them out and giving them hope for Hopes County. But anyway, that's Far Cry 5. It's a fun time. Probably play more of it. I've already put in like 10 hours. I'm sure I have more to do, and I'm looking forward to finishing it off. Now, Seth, what have you been recently playing?
So recently I've been playing 2 Point Museum, which was released back on March 4th of 2025. It is the third 2 Point game, with the first two being 2 Point Hospital and 2 Point Campus, and now there's 2 Point Museum. The iteration process as 2 Point Studios, which I believe under Sega, or they're at least published by Sega, they have been definitely improving based on their couple of first games. It's still early, since obviously this game's not even a month old, but at the time of this recording. But the hospital game and the university game both were very positive reviews because they're good games. Museum is right now overwhelmingly positive, and that's with thousands of recommendations already. So I definitely think that they've hit a kind of a gold mine. And I think for me at least, it's a little bit different designing a museum versus a hospital or a university. A hospital is stressful because people are coming in nonstop with problems that you need to solve. A university is stressful because you're trying to get people out with more intelligence that they came in with. A museum, you just need to have things for people to see. and maybe hearts of wisdom to them and hearts of happiness to them, which I think is ultimately less intimidating than having an onslaught of people that have problems or have ignorance, which is a problem in its own right. So I think that with the whole process of designing a museum and just like decorating it for funsies, because ultimately it's what a museum is. It's just a place where you store things, show them off, and have fun decorations around it, and charge people money to see it. There's also knowledge that can be garnered from museums, but versus a university or a hospital, there's a little bit more nuances within those than a museum where it's just like, come in and look at this ancient stuff and give us some money. So I've been liking that aspect of the game, being able to go in and just like decorate everything. The museum that you start off with is a pre-history museum, and so I have a lot of dinosaur bones and dinosaur stuff, and you can make a little like, I put little like ferns everywhere, and I have like banners of a dinosaur head at places. I got a giant dinosaur playscape that kids can play on, and you unlock areas and you send out a helicopter and you send your employees out to explore like expeditions, and they come back with crates, which gives you like a little bit of like I'm gonna say like a loot box scenario, but it does have a fun chest that unlocks with a fun like no money needs to be exchanged, but it shows you like you found a dinosaur skull, and then you can display the dinosaur skull. There's skeletons that you need to piece together, and ultimately as I explore other type of museums, I'm sure there'll be other types of things that you need to piece together. I'm interested in seeing the other types of museums versus just natural history, which is what dinosaurs are. Natural history, and see if there's other like art museums or all those, and then there'll probably be DLCs that will add additional museums to the future. The game also, apparently, as you play through it, you'll play with your museum, you'll unlock certain things, and then you'll be given another museum to run. You'll go in and maybe it'll be a different themed museum, and then later on in the game you'll go back to your original museum with additional new things that you've learned and new skills, and you'll modify and bring your old museum that you previously managed up to like a newer standard, which I think is kind of cool, being able to have like almost like a town type deal that you started and you can go back and modify. I've been really enjoying my time playing 2 Point Museum. I recommend it if anyone is interested in those type of games.
Nice. Well, it's very relevant that you're talking about a game that features dinosaurs in it, because today we're talking about games that feature dinosaurs in it. It's also relevant to last week's episode because we're talking about a game series based on a comic series. So look at that. Classic Gaming Brothers tying in two overarching themes, comic books and dinosaurs. And where do these themes collide? In Turok. That's right. We're talking about the character and the games of the Turok series. So the Turok games they're pretty self-contained. They all came out around the same time. So to start off, we'll focus on the character himself, who goes way back to a comic originally published back in 1954. This was issue number 596 of the 4-color comic series. 4-color comics were published by Dell Comics and began life back in 1939 and ran until 1962. Now, 4-color comics were kind of unique. Each issue was actually dedicated to a single character, though sometimes they would have adaptations of various movies or cartoon characters like Daffy Duck, and of course, original works like Turok. In issue 596, which was titled Turok, Son of Stone, you have the character of Turok first introduced. The cover of 596 is kind of, harkens back to that era of very pulp comics and books. It features a Native American sitting in a cave watching two dinosaurs fight. And the dinosaurs are those kind of old style 1950s dinosaur artwork, similar to the work of Charles R. Knight. You have the lumbering T-Rex with the tail touching the ground versus the kind of more aerodynamic look that most scientists, I think, ascribe to the T-Rex today. This story of Turok, Son of Stone was written by Gaylord Dubois, with pencils and inks by Rex Maxon. Dubois, who was originally from Winthrop, Massachusetts, had been in the comic business since the 1940s. He previously acted as a ghostwriter for the Red Ryder newspaper comic strip, and he also wrote for both the Roy Rogers and Gene Autry comic comic series. He would also be heavily involved in the adaptation of Tarzan for Dell Comics. With over 3,000 stories under his belt, Dubois was undoubtedly prolific in the comic scene, so needless to say, Turok was not his first rodeo. He actually originally planned for Turok to be a story acting as a spin-off of two characters he featured in his The Lone Ranger comic adaptation. These two characters, Young Hawk and Little Buck, would be rewritten as original characters. The story of Turok is about Turok and Andar, two Mandan warriors who explore a mysterious cave after a day of hunting. The cave leads them into a mysterious valley where they encounter dinosaurs like the Brontosaurus, Dimetrodon, Ankylosaurus, and various other creatures.
Turok and Andar would return in 4 colors number 656 and then would be picked up for a 27-issue run by Dell. This series ran from 1956 until 1962. In 1962, due to a variety of factors, different titles belonging to Dell would be acquired by Gold Key Comics, which was an imprint of Western, which an imprint is just like a different brand of comics, but owned by a larger company like Vertigo is an imprint of DC.
Yes.
So Western was a larger group at the time in the 60s, and they had Gold Key Comics, which was an imprint. Gold Key Comics would continue the run of Turok from 1962 until 1980, and in 1980, the series would be published under Western's Whitman Comics imprint. This original run of Turok, Son of Stone, would encompass around 130 issues, with the first 8 being written by Dubois, and the rest being written by Paul S. Newman. Most of the early run featured Turok and Andar trying to escape from the secret valley. In Dubois' last issue, Turok would finally escape, but would return to find Andar, who he had to leave behind due to an injured leg. When he returns, the entrance to the secret valley is permanently sealed by a landslide. Despite officially ending in 1982 with issue 130, the Turok series would not end. In 1992, Valiant Comics would reintroduce the character in number 12 of Magnus Robot Fighter. Instead of being from pre-Columbian times, Turok and Andar were introduced as being from the 18th century. The secret valley was called the Lost Lands, with the concept of it being a land where time has no meaning, and featured predominantly in, there's a crossover arc called Unity, where the main villain, Mother God, used the location of the Lost Lands as her base. The end features Turok and Andar being put into a post-apocalyptic future, along with a ton of bionic dinosaurs.
Which I think are called Bionosaurs.
Bionosaurs, that's right. Don't they get into fights too? I feel like they get into fights.
They do. So they're Bionosaurs, and there's also Dinosoids.
Yes, Dinosoids and Bionosoids who don't like each other.
Yeah, they don't like each other.
And sometimes they do like each other, and then there's a terrorist cell of one of the other ones who hates each other. Like, they're trying to get to a peace negotiation, and just like that guy from Journeyman, he's just trying to disrupt everything. Valiant would feature Turok in his own line of comics starting in 1993 called Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. 53 issues would be published, and then Acclaim, the video game company, acquired Valiant Comics when they purchased Voyager Communications. Acclaim would go on to publish their own line of Turok comics, this time just called Turok, from 97 until 98. This new series establishes that Turok is not his name, it's a title that means Son of Stone. He is also introduced as a protector of the barriers between the different dimensions, with the axis between these dimensions being the Lost Lands. In this cross-dimensional reality, dinosaurs and other monsters are pulled through, and Turok, whose real name is Joshua Fireseed in this particular run, must stop him. It's, you know who Joshua Fireseed is related to?
Who?
Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah, that's his brother. Now, because Acclaim was also a video game publisher, they would in fact tie in this new Turok comic line with a new game series. In fact, development on Turok Dinosaur Hunter, the game, began in 1996, prior to the publication of the comic. The developer, Iguana Entertainment, had been acquired by Acclaim, so they were tasked with the creation of this new game. The team consisted of around 15 people, with the project manager being David Deinsper, which Turok would be his first game. One original plan for Turok was to make it similar to Tomb Raider as a 3D platformer. They also toyed with the idea of it being a side-scroller, though they would decide to make it a first-person shooter. The team at Iguana ran into some issues along the way. While the N64 was incredibly capable and robust, and Nintendo was actually fairly supportive to the development of the game was just a bit too big for its britches. For one thing, at the time, they could only fit the game on an 8 megabyte cartridge, meaning they would have to have everything compressed. released. Despite this, though, the game was still able to use real-time lighting and particle effects, which were considered new at the time. Another issue was that Acclaim, having acquired 2 companies, not just Voyager Communications, but also Iguana, was now short a lot of money. They were not doing super hot financially. Sales were also down for the company, as they primarily had been involved in the 16-bit era, and the next generation was just barreling on ahead without them. So they really needed Turok to be a success. And there was hope that if they could sell at least 1 million units, they would be able to net around $45 million. There was other issues that factored in. One being, it was just going to be too expensive. It retailed for around $79.99 in 1997, which today is $159. That's an expensive video game.
Yeah.
The price would be dropped, though, the next year. They dropped it to $39.99, which was about $78 today.
To get hyped up, Acclaim invested into a big marketing push called Turok Tuesday, which is like the Verizon Tuesday deals days, except this one would just be pushing Turok. It did help increase Acclaim stock from around 62 cents per share to $5.94, so bringing it from penny stock territory to like GoPro territory, I guess.
Yeah, they were the original meme stock.
They were. The marketing campaign would ultimately cost around $4 million, and it paid off. Turok was a smash hit, surpassing over $60 million in sales by June of 1997 and making up 45% of Acclaim's revenue for the first fiscal quarter. By 1998, revenue was up to $200 million. People also loved the game, praising the graphics, controls, and gameplay. The publication, Computer and Video Games, gave it 5 stars, Edge gave it 9 out of 10, and GameSpot ranked it 8.1 out of 10. The story of Turok sees you playing as Tau Set, a Native American time traveler who takes on the role of Turok. You must protect the barrier between Earth and the Lost Land from dinosaurs and aliens. The main antagonist in the first game is the campaigner, who is looking for an artifact called the Chronoscepter, which he plans to use to destroy the barriers between the universes. It's your job, as Turok, to find the pieces of the Chronoscepter before the campaigner, which is a pretty lame villain name.
Yeah, he's just always campaigning.
He's like, I'm the campaigner.
We gotta get 270 to win.
Why do they always want to just destroy the world? Like, don't they understand they live in the world?
So I think the campaigner's plan is he's going to use the Chronoscepter to make himself the ruler, and he wants to destroy the barriers between the universes because the Lost Land doesn't have time. So if he's the ruler of the Lost Land, he's the ruler of everything.
There's a sequel, Seeds of Evil, which would release soon after in 1999. The sequel was in development before the first game was completed, with an 18-person staff steadily increasing as they worked on the project. That's pretty funny. So they're like, yes, we're getting closer to the first one coming out, so let's get more people to work on the second one.
Yeah.
As they were already familiar with the game engine that they had created for the game that they just released and were pretty fresh on working with it, they were able to put a little more effort into pushing the engine to its limit. This meant lowering the render fog and creating more complex geometry. The game would also support the N64 expansion pack, which would give the game high resolution mode, but I don't believe that it came with the expansion pack.
No, there's only one game I believe that comes with the expansion pack, and that is Donkey Kong 64, because it requires it because of a glitch.
That's right. And actually, a fun fact about the expansion pack is that there are 2 games that technically require it. Donkey Kong 64, because of the glitch, and also it coming with it, like it is packed with it.
Well, so they bundled it because of the glitch, because they realized it was more cost effective to bundle a copy of the expansion pack in every copy of Donkey Kong 64 than it was to sort out the glitch in time for the holiday season.
And Majora's Mask also required it. There are also 3 other games, Perfect Dark, StarCraft 64, and San Francisco Rush 2049, that do not require it. However, there is content within them that is completely inaccessible unless you use the expansion pack.
Perfect Dark being the worst of those, because you can't play the single player mode without the expansion pack, but you can do multiplayer. It's like you're in like a weird like bot simulator.
A few other games would support the pack, allowing games to utilize high res mode, just like Seeds of Evil. Seeds of Evil didn't require it. it just made the game look prettier with it.
Now, thanks to chip costs dropping in the later part of the 1990s, Seas of Evil went from being a 12 megabyte cartridge to a 32 megabyte cartridge, being the largest N64 game to be developed at the time. This larger size allowed the team to add in a smoother frame rate and multiplayer. Turok 2: Seeds of Evil was released in 1998 and sold around 1.4 million units by January of 1999. It also received favorable reviews, with the publication Edge giving it 9 out of 10, GameSpot giving it a 9 out of 10, and IGN rounding it out with a 9 out of 10. The plot of the game features Joshua Fireseed, the new Turok, who encounters an alien named Adon. Adon informs Turok that he is being summoned by the Elders of the Lost Land to defeat Primogen, an evil entity that is imprisoned in his ship that he used to try to witness the birth of the universe. So Primogen apparently had this spaceship and he wanted to witness the birth of the universe, and it crashed in the Lost Land, and now he's evil. So you got to stop Primogen and kill all of his minions.
Kind of like the Doctor Who.
I guess so.
Well, that's the death of the universe.
That's the death. Yeah.
Death of the Earth, I guess.
Death of the Earth. Yeah. Hitchhiker's Guide did the restaurant at the end of the universe, where you go to a restaurant that you get to witness the destruction of the universe as part of the restaurant's entertainment, and it's very expensive to get to the restaurant. However, the restaurant has a special bank account set up, so all you need to do is deposit 1 penny in your time, and by the time you get to the restaurant, through whatever time travel or manipulation of time streams, the compounded interest will have allotted to pay for your meal.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Because inflation's so bad.
Now, development of Turok 2 partially helped push for the third released game. Now, Turok Rage Wars would not be Turok 3, but it is the third N64 Turok game. Turok Rage Wars was developed while they were working on Turok 2 because they kept coming up with new ideas for multiplayer, but with the deadline for Turok 2 getting closer and closer, they couldn't fit all these ideas into one game, so they just scrapped the ideas, put them to the side, and said, we'll make a whole game out of these ideas. And they did. Turok Rage Wars is a unique game in that it is multiplayer focused, with the single player being a trials mode where you go through various death matches against like bots. There's also a co-op version of trials mode, so if you want to play with your friend against bots, that's possible. Though the main draw to Turok Rage Wars was in fact the multiplayer mode, which features Capture the Flag, Deathmatch, and a game mode called Monkey Tag, where one player is turned into a monkey and has to avoid getting killed. Despite being multiplayer centric, people seemed to like the game when it was released, with Edge giving it 7 out of 10, IGN giving it 8.9 out of 10, and GamePro giving it 5 stars. GameSpot, however, gave it a pretty low review. They did not like the AI for the game. They thought the AI was very limited, and it made the single player and co-op experience not great. They also noted that the graphics were really bad if you did not use the expansion pack. So those were 2 negative points.
Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion would be developed with a goal of making sure the game still played well without the N64 expansion pack. This meant reworking the graphics engine, though it would give the game a 30-degree wider field of view. Development was tight, with 21 staff members working 24-hour shifts, which is not something that we do anymore.
We hope we don't do anymore.
It's been publicly criticized. And the final game would be released on August 31st, 2000. The plot of the game revolves around the destruction of Primogen's ship from Seeds of Evil. The explosion triggered a chain reaction, releasing Oblivion, which is a malevolent entity that existed prior to the birth of creation. Joshua Fireseed, the current Turok, tries to stop Oblivion's minion, but dies in the process, leaving his siblings, Joseph and Danielle, to stop Oblivion, and one of them must become the next Turok. A co-op mode would be featured in the game where one player would be Danielle and the other player would be Joseph.
And in the story for the game, whichever character you pick becomes the next Turok. So there's no like canonical next Turok. So if you pick to play Danielle in the single player, Danielle is the next Turok. If you pick Joseph, Joseph is the next Turok.
The game scored relatively well, with the publication Game Informer giving it an 8 out of 10, GameSpot giving it a 7.9 out of 10, and IGN rating it a 7.4 out of 10. One of the features of the game that was significantly praised was the ability to save at any time, which one reviewer from IGN noted proving that you can no longer live in fear of playing for 45 minutes only to end up getting whacked before you reach a save beacon. The frame rate would be criticized by some reviewers, but others praised the graphics. A fifth game, Turok Evolution, would be developed next. This time, the game was slated for the next generation hardware of the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. Unlike the previous game, however, the story is a prequel to Dinosaur Hunter, putting you back in the role of Tal Set, one of the original Turoks. The game received fairly good reviews, with IGN rating it a 7.1 out of 10 and GameSpot giving it a 7.3 out of 10. One complaint, though, was the shooter levels don't do anything new for the genre. The multiplayer, however, was praised.
And lastly, a reboot called just Turok would be developed in 2008 by Propaganda Games. This new game would change up the lore pretty substantially. It featured a new character who was named Joseph Turok.
Nice.
It's like a very good name. He was a Native American space marine who has to arrest his former CO, General Roland Kane. He goes to look for his CO on a planet that is filled with dinosaurs and a private army run by Kane. This new version of Turok is, I would say, a substantial jump in both the story structure of the original Turok and also with some of the gameplay elements. Stealth is now a primary focus, and you have the ability to kill enemies silently with a bow or a knife. Reviewers were also pretty mixed on Turok 2008. GameSpot gave it a 6 out of 10, Eurogamer gave it a 6 out of 10, and the review show XPlay gave it a 3 out of 5. A big concern from reviewers was a faulty aim assist functionality, lackluster stealth mechanics, and camera shake. Camera shake being something that they probably put in to add realism, but when games do that, it's obnoxious. Despite the bad reviews, the game still sold over 1 million units in its first 2 months, and a sequel was in development, but Propaganda Games would shut their doors. We also would be remiss not to mention the 4 Turok games released for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, each tied into the N64 version of the game of the same name, but featured entirely different gameplay due to the fact that having a first-person shooter on a Game Boy is just frankly a miserable experience. Seeds of Evil for the Game Boy Color featured an entirely different story than the N64 version, with Joshua Fireseed trying to stop a group of villains from bringing dinosaurs to Earth. GBC version of Rage Wars was also different. Not only was it not multiplayer-centric, but it actually had a story. It was also a top-down game where you fight various enemies in 4 different worlds, and features a story where Turok has to stop dinosaurs from getting to Earth again. And then Shadow of Oblivion, Turok is tasked with helping peaceful dinosaurs stop a terrorist rebel group from trying to reignite a decades-long war. And they're just all different. Seth, you played the Shadow of Oblivion. Did you like it?
Yeah, I don't think I didn't dislike it. It like jumped between you being in a tank and not being in a tank.
Yeah.
And then there was like first person shooting elements as well between levels, which was kind of cool. I think if I remember correctly, the game started off with being like, we're going to give you all of the equipment and like make sure that you're good for everything. And then you're like, your first mission, you're like shirtless with a knife. And I'm like, ooh, some budget cuts going around if that's all the equipment that they can provide.
Yeah.
But it's a solid game.
Turok had plenty of games, and the 2008 one would actually be the last. The comics would continue, however. Dark Horse would pick up a run in 2010 called Turok, Son of Stone, which was unrelated to the games or the storyline of the games. It was actually a run based on the Gold Key comics and was a relatively short run, being only about 4 issues long. And in 2014, Dynamite actually would pick up a run of Turok called Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which ran 12 issues. This series also was part of a line based on Gold Key comics, and they did a crossover called Gold Key Alliance, which was published in 2016 and featured other Gold Key characters like the Mighty Samson, Dr. Spectre, Solar, Magnus, and of course Turok. And I was looking into it because I was thinking to myself, man, why hasn't anyone done anything with Turok recently? And it looks like currently, at least as of 4 years ago, according to Reddit, the Turok license is held by DreamWorks Animation. Dark Horse was also at one point apparently, as Dark Horse had the rights for a bit. Some people think Dark Horse still might have the rights. Dynamite, of course, had them for a bit. It's a little complicated who has the rights for Turok, though what it boils down to is someone has the rights. He is not in the public domain yet. Though, I think it would be fun if Turok was in the public domain, because I'm thinking of like some of the other like public domain superheroes and characters from those early years, and I think it's fun when people reestablish those characters in a new light. Not necessarily like what they did with Winnie the Pooh, where they turned him into a monster, but like there's a YouTuber I like who built a cinematic universe, quote unquote, of public domain superheroes. So he basically came up with this idea of like what a MCU of public domain superheroes would be like. And I love stuff like that because I think public domain allows for some real creative people to get their fingers into an IP. And I feel like Turok is prime for that. But I assume because Turok first came out in the 50s and because it's had so many licenses in between, it's going to be a bit of time before we see public domain Turok at least. But that being said, Turok's a great game series and an IP that has lasted the test of time. Now, getting into our retro rewind, Seth had me play Nightmare Circus for the Sega Genesis. Technically, Nightmare Circus was released in the United States, but only on the Sega Channel. Never got a cartridge release here. The game was released on cartridge back in June of 1996 in Brazil, published by Tectoy in Brazil, and developed by Funcom. In Nightmare Circus, you play as a Native American named Raven, who has apparently lost his family in a fire, according to a plot synopsis I read. When I started the game, I didn't really get that storyline. I don't know if I skipped something by accident. The game is pretty abrupt in its title, you press enter, and then you're in the hub world. So the game just kind of throws you into the action, and you explore a circus, and when you go near different rides, you hear an evil laugh, and when you click on those rides, you enter a level, and the level's a bad time. I spawned into one level, fell onto the ground, and immediately burst into flames, and I couldn't quite figure out what to do. I tried another level and it was equally hard. I think I was playing the game wrong, but I'm not sure. I just didn't like it, so I don't think it holds up. Next week, Seth, I want you to play Dragonheart Fire and Steel for the Game Boy.
I like that you said you didn't like it, so it doesn't hold up.
I don't like it, so it doesn't hold up.
That's fair. Zach had me play Last Action Hero for Sega Genesis, which was released back in 1994 in the U.S. market and not released anywhere else, thank God. And it's based on the film Last Action Hero starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. It is a side-scroll beat-em-up that it's bad. It's just really bad. First, you spawn in a world and you have 60 seconds to beat the level. There is a reticule that is targeting you where if you slow down, you get shot. Then, bad guys spawn and they are hard to hit while they hit you very easily. Then, you get shot anyways from a gun, like from a shooter that's off the screen. And that's the first combat. You then proceed to go to the right a little bit and it happens again. The same bad guys, the same attack, the same reticule, and it's just bad. It's bad. Across all the publications and reviews, it could not score over a 30% on a scale of 100 and had a number of solid 1 stars. And all the complaints, and I experienced the complaints, was the controls. Everything you want to be able to do, punching, jumping, kicking, it's all just loose and clumsy and doesn't play right. It's not tight, and that's what you need controls to be relatively tight in a beat-em-up game. And according to a review that I dug up from All Game, the enjoyment level was 1 star, with the quote being, "The movie was much more enjoyable, and the movie was lame."
That's such a good review.
And then for the replay value, they said, after playing this game a few times, most gamers will want to sell it in a garage sale.
God, that's also such a good review.
Yeah, it was a pretty scathing review of the game that I just felt in my soul with it. The reviewer didn't hate everything. He did say the graphics were good, and like the graphics were respectable for the time. They looked good, but this was one of those games that just was part of that long slog of games that were movie tie-ins that just were bad. Anyway, Hard Pass doesn't hold up. Next week, Zach, you could play Outrunners for the Sega Genesis.
I will. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. If anyone has any memories of playing Turok or reading the comics, send us an email, classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're also available on YouTube. Check us out on social media. Just look us up, Classic Gaming Brothers or CG Brothers Pod, depending on where you are. And of course, you can go to our website, www.classicgamingbrothers.com. With that, Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. That's right. Bye.